While the Iowa caucus is still a few months away, Democrats are already trying to gauge who fares best in a matchup with President Trump. In the Chegg College Pulse election tracker, Senators Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren remain the frontrunners among Democratic students, with 94% supporting Sanders over Trump and 92% backing Warren over Trump.
One candidate maintains strong support amongst Democrats while also converting a significant number of Republican and independent voters. According to College Pulse, almost 1 in 5 Republican students would vote for Andrew Yang over President Trump, while 2/3 of independent students would vote for Yang instead of the president. Here to dive more into those numbers, more with us, is the College Pulse CEO and co-founder Terren Klein. Terren, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Great to be here.
Absolutely. Terren, this is a fascinating crossover support here. I mean, 1 in 5 Republicans on college campuses would vote for Andrew Yang, and so many of these independents would. That really does set him apart from the rest of the Democratic field, right?
Yes, I mean, first zooming out, we have been, Chegg and College Pulse, research and analytics company focused on college students. We've been tracking the college student vote since March, and we've been seeing how it's been trending over time. So first to zoom out, we see that Bernie Sanders and Warren are at the top of the field, 35%, 26% respectively. Yang polls around 10%. But when you look across the political spectrum, Andrew Yang is unique in attracting independent and Republican college students as well. So we did head-to-head matchups where we saw how each Democratic primary candidate would perform. And we see 1 in 5 Republican students say they would vote for Yang over Trump. And in contrast, these frontrunners, Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders, they poll in the single digits. And the only candidate that even comes close to Yang is Biden at 10% in a head-to-head matchup. Biden versus Trump.
Yeah.
Very interesting. And what do you sort of attribute that to? Why do you think that Yang has so much crossover support?
Right. So that's a great question. That's the exact type of question that we're going to be diving into deeper in the Chegg College Pulse election tracker. I mean, looking at the data that we know right now, we see that, like Trump, Andrew Yang is a businessman, never held office. We know that those are two net positive attributes for a candidate to have in the eyes of Republicans and independents. And we also know that while he advocates for universal basic income and a form of Medicare for all, he doesn't get the same kind of socialist label given to Sanders and Warren, which we know is a strong net negative attribute for a candidate to have in the eyes of Republicans and candidates. But meanwhile, when you ask Republican and independent students what they think of actually Andrew Yang's policies, specifically, what his policy is to address the nation's student debt crisis, you see that 3/4 of independent students and more than 1/3 of Republican students are actually supportive of his plan. So we're going to be diving into this deeper in future articles in the College Pulse Chegg election tracker, but those are some early hypotheses that we'd be going in with.
And so what else do you see in terms of these crossover support? I mean, you said earlier we had talked about how Bernie Sanders is leading amongst these college students, but we don't see as much of the crossover support. How are they doing generally in these head-to-head matchups?
Right, so Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren are polling in a head-to-head matchup, but roughly the same, around 7%. If the candidates were, so again, if they presented with the question of if the general election was held today and the two candidates were Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren and then Donald Trump, roughly 7% of students would choose, Republican students would choose Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren. But I think what's interesting to point out is, why this kind of electability calculus is particularly relevant among college students is we see that 98% of Democrats say that they're going to vote for Democrats no matter who the candidate is. But only 75% of Republicans say they're going to vote for Trump no matter who the Democratic candidate is. And also that support, when you ask, is there anything that Trump can do to actually lose your support before the general election? 70% of Republican students say, yes, there is something he can do to lose my support. So when it comes down to it, you have roughly 80% of Republican students whose vote is up for grabs. And when you look at the Democratic candidates, Andrew Yang seems to have the best shot of actually converting those Republican student voters to vote for a Democratic candidate.
Yeah.
So interesting and so counter to the national narrative, which paints Trump supporters as this like cult-like monolith that nothing could possibly change their minds. Right. I mean, what you found here with young people, at least, is their minds are very much open. They're very much evaluating new candidates and listening for new ideas that appeal to them.
Right. I mean, that was one of the reasons why Chegg and us College Polls started this tracker, is that it's an overlooked population that has not been sufficiently studied. And that's really because, we contend that with traditional polling methods, you're not able to actually reach the college student demographic. And so that's why through College Pulse, we are able to study them in a level of granularity that's really unprecedented. And we're able to uncover these stories so that when the election comes around, we're not surprised that college students turn out and they turn out for a particular candidate.
Mm-hmm. And what about with college students of color? Who's performing the best there?
Yeah, so that is a question that I am looking up as we speak. I'm just going through college.
I love that.
And I can tell you that you can see that among Black students, Bernie Sanders is at the top of 43%, followed by Elizabeth Warren at 21%, Joe Biden at 12%, and Andrew Yang at 7%. So at first glance, it seems to be that Bernie Sanders is the top, at least with black student voters, is the top performer.
Wow, that's really interesting.
Yeah, very interesting. Always great chatting with you.
Terren.
Such great insights. Thank you, Terren.
Bye.
All right, we'll have more Rising right after this.